Hey guys, welcome to the Senior Rehab Project, the podcast for the community of rehab clinicians working to advance care for older adults. I'm your host, Alyssa, and this is the Old Not Weak segment. In today's episode, I wanted to discuss home exercise programs because home exercise programs are such an integral part of our profession as a whole. Our goals and what we're working towards to, increase strength, balance, safety in the home, decrease fall risk, all these kinds of things, we only see patients on a short-term basis. And we want to maintain all of these benefits, obviously, from the long-term perspective. And one of the main ways we're going to achieve that is if we can get our patients to comply to the recommendations that we're giving them. So I did look into a couple studies, and there's not a lot of literature looking at adherence to home exercise programs and kind of how we can modify certain things to see if we can increase adherence, because most of it is subjectively reported. And kind of thinking about, first off, what, the compliance levels and things like that. There was a study published in the Academy of Geriatric Physical Therapy in 2016 by Gallagher. In the intro in this study kind of was pretty eye-opening as far as reporting that there's about a 44% rate of adherence to prescribed home exercise programs. And it kind of leads into which I can easily apply to the home health setting as far as in assisted living facilities and things like this, where they say, have titled this a cyclical affair in rehab, where you experience short-term gains while you're seeing patients when they're actually getting formal physical therapy. And then once you discharge, you see a slow decline due to, decreased compliance as far as, memory impairment, decreased motivation, all these kinds of things. And then you see them back on your caseload, and you kind of go through this, short-term gains. We're not compliant with the exercise program, and it kind of just falls into the cycle. Now, again, not saying that that's every situation, but it is fairly common. So this study actually looked at a lot of times as PTs, we tend to focus on the benefits of exercise from a physiological perspective. So, it's going to, increase strength, balance, flexibility. You're going to decrease fall risk, these types of things, looking at the facts, decrease your risk of stroke and chronic disease and all these kinds of things. But then it also looked at, so what if we, instead of using facts, we kind of hit on the psychological, emotional kind of meaning-based outcomes. So as far as, you're going to maintain independence if we have, people that are still living on their own. If we kind of experience these declines, then you might not be able to live on your own, and you might, lose your independence and that kind of stuff. Or, do you still want to be able to play with your grandchildren and things like that? Or, if they say they cycle with their friends, or are you still going to be able to do these things, if we don't stick with regular exercise? So what they did is they took these two different approaches and assessed adherence. So everyone went through a 4-week physical therapy program to make sure they could do all the exercises and things. And then they assessed adherence 2 weeks later. Now, the problem was it's all subjective. So it's all self-reported adherence, which there could be a little bit of bias in that because, patients might know that they want to report that they were doing it, and they don't want to, let people down, that kind of thing. So the patients were between 60 and 90, either have low back, hip, or knee pain primarily, and did actually require physical therapy. So the average age ended up being about 69, which is typically might be a little bit lower than what we see in the home health setting at least. But so the factual was just, typical facts that we usually tend to use. And then the other emotional group kind of they both received handouts, but one of them they used words like live, laugh, love, and had time spending with your loved ones and things like that, more of that emotional emphasis. And what they found was that the results as far as adherence goes were about the same. Now, again, all self-reported, but what they found was that the average adherence was about 57%, and each of them received about 1 to 5 exercises because they weren't all the same. And then they performed it about 3 to 4 times a week, even though it was prescribed as 7 days. And so overall, the adherence scores were similar for both groups. There was a few minute differences. One of them, which I thought was kind of interesting, was there was a higher adherence if they had mentioned the benefits of exercise and have established the home exercise program prior to discharge. So sometimes we get, we're on that last visit and then you put together this home exercise program on the very last visit. But there was an increase in adherence if they had discussed the home exercise program and either the factual information or the emotional information a couple visits before, and were able to kind of solidify those. So that is one thing I kind of took from this as far as the clinical application is maybe we need to start discussing, not saying we don't do this already, but maybe be more cognizant of discussing the importance of, exercise adding in, so not just staying in that straight path of factual information, but some people might respond better to that emotional, psychological kind of side of benefits. So that is one thing to keep in mind. And basically, overall, they want to kind of say, you got to kind of target the reasons as to why patients are adhering to or why they're actually getting therapy in the first place and what they would like to do. Then you can kind of find those reasons and adapt kind of how you're going to describe the home exercise program and kind of describe why they should be doing it. And we know that this is a large problem with PT, and most people don't want to be discharged because they like someone to come in to help with accountability and things like that. And it can be difficult, especially with some patients. Like I try to establish the home exercise program after 2 or 3 visits, so you can kind of get a read on them, kind of see what their consistently what their abilities are, how they respond to exercise, because I don't like to give it right off the bat just because you want to kind of feel it out a little bit. And I found that maybe that can help increase adherence as well. Pictures, making sure that I write down the right cues for them, kind of thing. So I just wanted to mention this study because it was kind of interesting to kind of think about adding in that emotional piece as well, because I will admit I typically do try to stay within, the physiological benefits and that kind of thing. So I just wanted to briefly talk about that study. There are a lot more details and they measured a few other things if you're interested in that. But also, I reached out onto the Facebook group to see kind of what other people are doing and what other people have maybe had luck with, to kind of get some other input. And I did get a couple of interesting suggestions. So one of them was by Jamie, and he was talking about if you kind of explain the benefits in more of a long-term view. Like what do they still want to be doing in 3 to 5 years as far as, playing with grandchildren or seeing their grandchildren grow up and going to sporting events, that type of thing, still be able to go out and play cards with their friends, etc. And I like how he described this as almost like a financial planning for retirement, but with movement. So kind of planning out for the future and kind of seeing it in a long term versus just that short term, which we kind of tend to stay in. Now, another one was by Kathy, and she was saying, find out why people don't want to do exercise. So, and she said one of her patients just said, exercise is boring. And so she followed up with the conversation saying, okay, is there something we could do to make it more exciting? And she actually said listening to hard rock music. And so they were able to make a playlist, and she was able to increase that adherence a little bit. And then fear obviously can be a big barrier. So just keeping things maybe almost a little bit under their skill level currently, just so they feel comfortable in starting out with those real simple exercises and then progressing. So not progressing too fast. And also, I really liked this point. She always asks, with the exercises and with the home exercise program in general, on a scale of 1 to 10, like how confident are you in carrying this out? And, if they say a 7, then you ask, like, what can you modify so you can make it an 8 or a 9? So kind of really targeting in on those barriers, which I think is really important. Another one, which I thought was also pretty interesting, was Paul was making home exercise programs, but in video form. Now, I know that this obviously isn't feasible for all of us, but it was really interesting to kind of think more of the, maybe in like the assisted living facilities or our patients that might be a little bit more proficient in technology and things like that. That would be a great idea. It's all timed, so you're doing the exercises with them and instead of just describing it and having them do it on their own. So I thought that was very cool, something to kind of think about in the future, and if you have that availability. Another, Lewis also is saying having a follow-up kind of group exercise class, which again, it might be a little bit more feasible in an assisted living facility, but we can, stretch it out if you were able to find a space like a gym or something. Again, a little bit harder in home health if you're kind of all over the place, but something you can invite your patients to, even if it's just, once a month, just giving that accountability. So a transition into group exercise, also finding community resources, I think is super important as well, to maybe add into that accountability piece, that socialization piece, to see if you can kind of find that connection in the community, whether it's at the Y or a local rec center or things like that. And then let's see. And then we had a couple other responses, just saying, keep the exercise program simple. 1 to 5 exercises is probably the most. I mean, there are some patients who will do 6 or 10, but again, that's you're going to have to kind of feel that out, and see. That's again why also trying to establish it early. And then I always ask every visit, how are they doing and how can we modify this so we can work through strategies to fix that, so we can see if we can increase that adherence throughout the episode. So when you're done with the episode, you have a clearer understanding of will they follow through with this or not. So we had a lot of good suggestions, and this is also an ongoing conversation that we can keep having on the Facebook page or on Twitter. If we can, keep sharing these ideas, because again, home exercise programs are such an integral part of rehab in general, across all settings, from home health, acute care, outpatient, anything. So it's one thing, obviously there's not a perfect answer. There's not a right or wrong. It's just being able to spend enough time with your patient that you can feel out, what will work for them. So thank you guys so much for listening to the Senior Rehab Project. If you have gained from this episode, consider supporting our work. You can become a patron through Patreon, a service that allows people like you to support people like us. You can give as little as $1 a month or become a game changer for $8.99 a month, where you'll get an awesome Redefined Old mug and access to our monthly meetups. Just go to seniorrehabproject.com to learn more and find the show notes for this episode. Talk to you soon.